person who would say, "You doing that for what reason?" Nah, you can't do that. The rule says that you can't do this, you can't do this. This is what the rules say. And
the rules of the prison or the rules of the streets?
Of the gang. The rules of the street. Yeah. So I was a rule guy, and they just, it was to their advantage to get me out of the way. So when I decided to take a step back, they were like, yes. And it was to my advantage as well. And this was in 2005.
So there was no resistance?
None. And at that time, this is where a lot of the what they call set tripping began. The organization began to implode on itself.
The gang organization.
The gang organization. There was a lot of infighting, sets against sets, and I was just always against that. And it was time for me to go, and I didn't care whatever the consequences was. I was fortunate that there weren't any consequences, but I didn't care what the consequences was. I just walked away.
And then that begins your journey.
This begins my journey. I got into school. I got my GED. From there, I got involved in correspondence courses. I started interacting with guys who were teaching ART, aggression replacement training, and I started to begin to understand how these concepts work, what positive visualization is, deep breathing, how to remove yourself, conflict resolution. All of these ideas of change began to take place with me. Substance abuse. I stopped smoking weed. I stopped smoking cigarettes. I was smoking like 30 cigarettes a day. I'm literally having chest pains from smoking cigarettes. And I realized that I wanted to live. And the only way that I was going to be able to live and walk out of prison was to remove myself from these substances.
So you hear this story. This sounds like an amazing story of rehabilitation, a man changing his life around from prison time, being in gangs, substance abuse, 30 cigarettes a day, which, real talk, I used to smoke about 30 cigarettes a day, but I quit, but not necessarily. I'm vaping my ass off these days, although I do breathe a lot better. All my vapors out there, comment with how you're feeling and how many smokes you used to smoke. But back to this story that just sounds so motivational. You heard him. He got out of the gang at the right time and didn't have a lot of, repercussions, where some guys, it's hard for them to get away with their life or their health, or they got to sign into PC or whatever. He just stepped away, and there was all that set tripping going on. And this is, it goes even further, as this was just featured on Joe Rogan, this guy, Sheldon Johnson. He went on and got his education and got involved in this Queens Defenders, a public law firm, which I believe helps out people, who really can't afford the best legal defense. As we know, or if you don't know, you've been living under a rock with everything that's been going on with prison reform and criminal justice reform and, the cash bail system, everything that's come under question, how, the legal system is really tough on the less fortunate that don't have that dispensable income to bail out and get a good legal defense. They end up pleading out to something that they probably shouldn't have and maybe could have beat the case. And, it's just a revolving system. And then they got something on their record and it ruins their life, So this guy changed his whole life around and got involved in this legal activism, and you're like, what an amazing story. And he made it all the way to Joe Rogan to talk about it. And you see him pictured with District Attorney Alvin Bragg. But if you ain't heard the news that broke now, the story took a very twisted turn. And I'm listening to this guy and everything, and he sounded so sincere to me. It didn't seem like he was BSing one bit, and he really devoted his life to all this. But he's been arrested for a grisly murder and had a severed head in his house. And it doesn't stop there. There's reports that the victim was someone he had beef with from prison. That's what they're saying. I don't know. Stay tuned for the updates. Make sure to sub to the channel, like the video, share your comments, your thoughts and all that. But the details of some witnesses that lived next door in the same building is like bone chilling. Check out what they said. So listen, Joe Rogan guest and staffer for public law firm Queens Defenders, Sheldon Johnson, arrested for murder after severed head was found in an apartment. According to the victim's neighbors, they could hear him pleading with Johnson before 2 shots rang out. Police found in the apartment a human torso in a blue bin and a head in a freezer. Surveillance footage, as you see the pictures, him with that bin, and reportedly he came and left the premises multiple times, changed up his clothes, different outfits. I don't know exactly what the time frame was, how many between when he came back and forth. So, I don't know if that's like days passed or he was just switching up his clothes because of evidence or whatever. I don't know. But surveillance footage shows Johnson arriving at the apartment with the blue bin. He showed up multiple times in different outfits. "Please don't. I have a family," the victim yelled, according to neighbors, before he was killed. Johnson is a criminal justice activist and previously joined Joe Rogan on his podcast. And he also appears to know District Attorney Alvin Bragg. On the podcast, Johnson spoke out about his time in prison as he advocated for criminal justice reform. Johnson also spoke out about changing his life around. And wild is the finish to the press release, and wild is an understatement. This guy, like I said, he really seemed sincere. And I mean, the amount of work he put in, you could tell he was really about this. And I don't know what the story is, what made him revert back to his criminal ways and take a man's life. And not just take a man's life. It almost sounds like Jeffrey Dahmer type-ish. You know what I'm saying? Like severed heads, torsos in blue bins. This is just bonkers. So that's the latest. Again, subscribe, stay tuned for the updates. I'll definitely be following this story as well as other true crime content. Let's talk about it on the comments. I'm out of here.